Cesare Battisti returns to Italy almost 4 decades after escaping from prison. The former left-wing guerrilla fighter was arrested in Bolivia at the weekend. No questions are banned, says French President Emmanuel Macron in an open letter to France. This ahead of a 2-month national debate on issues that sparked the Yellow Vest movement. And Theresa May warns of paralysis in Parliament a day before British MPs vote on her Brexit deal, a senior member of her cabinet admitting it's unlikely to pass. Those are the headlines. I'm Claire Pride. It's good to have you with us. We start with some news just coming into us from Poland. The mayor of Gdansk has died after being stabbed during a charity event. Paweł Adamowicz was stabbed several times in front of thousands of people on Sunday. Turns out the suspect, who's been detained, is a convicted criminal. Local media reporting that during the attack he shouted from the stage that he'd been wrongly imprisoned. 53-year-old Adamowicz was the mayor of Gdansk for 20 years. All right, let's go to Italy now, where Cesare Battisti stepped off a plane earlier this Monday. The authorities there sought his extradition over 4 murders for years. It was back in 1981 that the former left-wing guerrilla fighter escaped from prison. He lived in Brazil for many years, but his arrest was in Bolivia at the weekend. And joining me now, our international affairs editor, Philip Tell. Philip, if you could start off by telling us a little bit more about Battisti.
Well, Cesare Battisti is a left-wing guerrilla who was a member of the armed proletariat for communism in Italy in the 1970s and who was accused of involvement in attacks around the country and also 4 murders which took place in 1978 and 1979, for which he was arrested and placed in jail. And as you said, he managed to escape from jail in 1981. After he'd escaped from jail, he was tried in absentia in Italy, first given a 12-year jail sentence, and then a few years later given a second jail sentence of life, which, of course, he's been seeking to avoid ever since then, saying that he admits to involvement with the group, but he was not involved with the murders. So we've had this fantastic cat-and-mouse game taking place for the past 37 years when he was in Italy, then he escaped to France, and then he went to Brazil, and then he went back to France again. He's also been in Mexico, and then now he was caught in Bolivia. So I think for the Italian authorities, this is a supreme moment, the capture of the man who's been evading justice, as they see it in Italy, for the past 37 years, who is now back in the country and who looks like he's going straight back to jail. And there's been controversy over his involvement in the murders. Can you explain? Well, that's true. There have been many left-wing groups who say, come on now, that this isn't true. He wasn't involved in these murders. He's admitted that he was involved with the group, but that he wasn't involved in these murders. And the evidence is that there is no evidence which can incriminate him. And on top of that, they're saying that the people who said that he was involved were being forced to make confessions under torture. They were also plea bargaining in many cases, saying, OK, we'll incriminate Battisti if you'll reduce our sentences. So therefore, he didn't have a proper trial in Italy, and he wasn't there to defend himself. So therefore, he should not be re-imprisoned, and he should be let off from these charges. So what happens to him now? Well, he's back in Italy now. That's the end of this very long cavalcade around the world. He's been like a chameleon, escaping from jail, crossing over borders, profiting from the clemency of certain heads of state, especially Inácio Lula da Silva in Brazil, who refused to extradite him. He also profited from the clemency of the former French President François Mitterrand under the so-called Mitterrand doctrine in the 1980s, where former left-wing fighters in Italy were given a refuge in France. That's no longer the case. That's why he went to Brazil afterwards. So that's all come to an end. If you like, it's a bit like the far right of Jair Bolsonaro in Brazil winning one over the far left in the form of Cesare Battisti, who is now back in Italy, which, of course, as we know, is a country run by the far right, and where he now faces a very long jail term. All right. Thank you very much indeed, Philip.
Turning our attention now to the French president's latest efforts to dissipate the anger we've seen on the streets over the last few weeks. A national debate gets underway on Tuesday in town halls and online. And Emmanuel Macron has said no topics are off limits. This in a letter released a day after round 9 of Yellow Vest protests. Emerald Maxwell reports.
Kicking off the national debate in a 2,300-word letter, Emmanuel Macron told the French people no questions are off limits. But he has already disappointed some by ruling out certain issues from the discussion and holding fast to one of his most unpopular reforms, his decision to scrap the wealth tax. In a tweet, the head of the Socialist Party said this wasn't good enough.
We cannot call on French citizens to take part in a debate while forbidding them from discussing the matter of the wealth tax. The conclusions of the debate must be drawn by our fellow citizens, not by the president.
In other areas, Macron comes across as more flexible. Given it was fuel taxes that triggered protests initially, he asked voters for their suggestions for environmental proposals. He also puts the subject of institutional reform on the table, asking if voting should be more proportional and whether there should be more referendums. The president doesn't shy away from the highly sensitive subject of immigration either. While maintaining that the right to seek asylum could not be questioned, he asked people if they want the government to set annual immigration targets. Left-wing politician Jean-Luc Mélenchon called the debate a big diversion, pointing out Macron's refusal to modify his decisions in the past. But after weeks of protest, it's reactions from the Yellow Vests themselves that the government is eagerly awaiting. Benjamin Cauchy, a Yellow Vest with ties to far-right parties, took to Twitter to react to the letter.
Writing a letter for a debate where we already know the outcome? Move along, there's nothing to see here, says Emmanuel Macron. How disrespectful.
The national debate is set to begin on Tuesday and will last for 2 months.
Moving on to Theresa May trying again to persuade MPs to back her Brexit deal. A day before they're due to vote on it, the UK's Prime Minister warned of paralysis in Parliament and no Brexit if her deal is rejected. One of her ministers, Liam Fox, admitting it's unlikely the government will win Tuesday's vote. The opposition Labour Party has vowed to table a vote of no confidence if May is defeated. Ellen Gainsford has more.
Speaking at a factory in Stoke-on-Trent, where a majority voted to leave the EU, Theresa May reminded lawmakers that they risk losing the trust of the British people if they try to block Brexit.
What if we found ourselves in a situation where Parliament tried to take the UK out of the EU in opposition to a Remain vote? People's faith in the democratic process and their politicians would suffer catastrophic harm. We all have a duty to implement the result of the referendum.
If May's deal is rejected on Tuesday, she has until the following Monday to come back to Parliament with a new proposal. Meanwhile, some lawmakers are exploring ways to further wrest control of the Brexit process from the government. During her address, May said pro-EU MPs could block Brexit if her plan doesn't pass.
But while no deal remains a serious risk, having observed events at Westminster over the last 7 days, it's now my judgment that the more likely outcome is a paralysis in Parliament that risks there being no Brexit.
The vote on May's deal was originally scheduled for December, but the Prime Minister postponed the ballot, hoping to buy time to convince lawmakers. In the intervening weeks, there have been few signs of a shift in opinion. A heavy defeat could leave the Prime Minister in a precarious position. Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn has said he'll trigger a vote of no confidence in the government if the vote doesn't pass.
That's it from me, but don't forget you can go to our website. That, of course, is france24.com. Our top story there, the same as in this bulletin. In Italy, Cesare Battisti back after almost 4 decades on the run. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned.